This is the new flagship Apple iPhone, the iPhone 16 Pro. But is it a major upgrade in iPhone history, or just more of the same? Let's find out. What's up, Internet? I'm Brian McDuff, aka BMac, and welcome to another video. So yes, indeed, today we are going to be reviewing the Apple iPhone 16 Pro, the latest flagship iPhone offering with some new bells and whistles worth talking about. But first things first, I do need to give a huge thank you and a shout out to Apple for actually loaning out an iPhone 16 Pro for me to be able to check out, review, and use. So Apple, thank you. Appreciate you. But let's get things started right away here, starting things out by talking about the design of the iPhone 16 Pro and what makes this flagship smartphone so special on the outside. At first glance, the iPhone 16 Pro is gonna look pretty much the same as the iPhone 15 Pro. And that's because it pretty much is. The iPhone 16 Pro and the iPhone 16 Pro Max are both actually ever so slightly larger than last year's iPhone 15 Pro models. But the overall look and feel remains largely the same. We have the same squared off matte finished edges here, while still allowing a soft, rounded, and comfortable feel when you're holding the device. And we are still getting a Corning glass front and back with a grade 5 titanium frame, but Apple is promising that the ceramic glass covering on the front display is now 50% stronger, making it what Apple also promises to be 2 times tougher than glass found in any other smartphone. All of this capped off with the same very much appreciated IP68 dust and water resistance rating. You're also getting 4 different titanium finishes to choose from this year, those colors being black titanium, white titanium, desert titanium, and natural titanium, all of which look stunning and downright luxurious per usual. So even though design hasn't changed a whole heck of a lot here with the iPhone 16 Pro, I'm okay with that. I think that the iPhone 16 Pro, just like the iPhone 15 Pro from last year, has a design that I would consider pretty darn close to being perfect, and quite possibly my favorite iPhone design ever. But how about what this device looks like when you're looking at it? What's the display like built into the iPhone 16 Pro this year? And is it still just as pretty? Well, just like the overall design of this device, the display is also pretty much identical to last year's iPhone 15 Pro model. The displays in the iPhone 16 Pro and the iPhone 16 Pro Max actually are a tad bit larger than the iPhone 15 Pro. The 16 Pro measuring in at 6.3 inches and the 16 Pro Max measuring in at 6.9 inches. And the displays are still the same LTPO OLED 1 to 120 Hz always on displays that support HDR10 and Dolby Vision, with the brightness ratings also remaining the same. I would have liked to have seen a slight uptick in display brightness performance here in the 16 Pro. It's not that the current ratings are bad by any means, and I can still see the display even in direct sunlight without any kind of problem. It gets bright enough. But when you are directly comparing the iPhone 16 Pro display to other flagship displays, some other flagship displays can still, at this point, get considerably brighter. In terms of resolution, you are getting the same PPI pixel density ratings as last year. The display is boasting 460 PPIs for both, which is still more than enough to be happy with and being able to use the smartphone without seeing individual pixels. But one improvement you are getting on the iPhone 16 Pro display is actually, if you could believe this, even slightly smaller bezels. Truthfully, the smaller size of the bezels are so subtle and actually so hard to see unless you're specifically looking at the iPhone 15 Pro next to the iPhone 16 Pro. But when it's side by side, you can see that the bezels are slightly smaller, and we always love some smaller bezels. But let's talk about what's probably the most highly anticipated category for the iPhone 16 Pro this year, the cameras, and how the camera system has been improved, if at all, from an already pretty impressive camera system to begin with. As expected, we do still have the return of 3 rear-facing cameras this year, alongside a front-facing selfie camera, with a 48 megapixel f1.78 wide-angle lens and OIS, a 12 megapixel f2.8 telephoto lens, 5 times optical zoom and OIS, an improved 48 megapixel f2.2 lens for the ultra-wide lens, and the same 12 megapixel f1.9 selfie lens, and also with OIS. Hopefully you picked up on one of those major changes this year with the iPhone 16 Pro, that being a 5 times optical zoom for the telephoto lens on both models, that 5x optical zoom in the past being reserved for just the max size Pro iPhone. For video, you can shoot up to 4K 120 frames per second, with slow motion video up to 240 frames per second at 1080p, with support for 10-bit Dolby Vision HDR, with the ability to capture 4K 60 frames per second and 4K 120 frames per second with ProRes log footage when using an external storage solution. And as you can see from some of the example photos I snapped with the iPhone, I literally have no complaints here with how the camera system itself is performing. But the cherry on top, if you will, that Apple is offering you this year is the physical camera control button. And even though it's a cool idea, and perhaps even a very helpful button for a lot of you out there, I will very readily admit for myself, I am rarely, if ever, using it. It is nice to have to be able to quickly launch whatever camera app you have attached to it from wherever you are within iOS, but for being honest, you could pretty much just as quickly and easily do this with the action button if you have it set up for that, or if you're on the lock screen, literally just swiping left. I know it's touch sensitive, so it does allow for a soft press and even some swipe controls for adjusting various camera settings. I know that, but honestly, I just find the camera control button within camera apps to be just kind of hard to use, kind of clunky. I actually find it just easier to use the on-display camera settings and adjustments rather than trying to use the camera control button. And you probably should consider the fact that you could probably introduce a little camera shake as well if you're using the camera control button as a physical shutter button. I will point out and acknowledge that there is a camera control API available for third-party developers, so maybe we'll see some cool new ways to use this camera control button moving forward, but for now, I'm really just, I don't see a need to use it. In addition to all that, we do also have the ability to use some new photographic styles on the iPhone 16 Pro series now, which more or less is a way to fine tune and stylize the way photos are captured using the native photo app on your iPhone. These days, I'm almost always using my favorite third-party camera app, Halide, for my iPhone photo taking. So photographic styles on the iPhone 16 Pro just don't really matter to me. I can appreciate what Apple is doing with the minor camera upgrades, the new camera control button, and these new photographic styles, but they're just not really features I find groundbreakingly new or features I'm planning on using or currently use on the iPhone 16 Pro. But backing up all these photo and video taking capabilities is of course gonna be processing power. So what kind of performance is the iPhone 16 Pro offering this year? This year, the iPhone 16 Pro is shipping alongside the new Apple A18 Pro chipset, alongside 8 gigs of RAM. I will say that I was slightly expecting a few more gigs of RAM in the iPhone this year, to at least make it on par with what other flagship smartphones are offering. But I know upgraded hardware for the sake of upgraded hardware isn't always necessary, and I could honestly say it doesn't really feel like the iPhone 16 Pro needs more RAM. Doesn't feel like I'm being held back at all with what this thing is capable of. For storage, you're getting 4 options to choose from on the iPhone 16 Pro, and only 3 options to choose from on the iPhone 16 Pro Max, with 128 gigs as an option on just the Pro, and 256 gigs, 512 gigs, or 1 terabyte options for both. I'm really not sure why 128 gigs is still an option, or why it's only available for the iPhone 16 Pro for that matter, but I guess it is what it is. And per usual, if you plan on shooting a lot of raw photos or especially ProRes footage, get yourself the highest possible storage configuration your budget allows for, because especially if you start to take a lot of ProRes footage, whew, that footage eats up local storage space. Trust me, I know. But with this new A18 Pro chip, Apple is promising up to 20% faster speeds with enhanced efficiency and cooler overall performance. And based on my experience, some benchmarks that I personally run, and overall daily usage, I have to say that the 16 Pro and the A18 Pro chipset within it does seem to be more powerful than the iPhone 15 Pro with the A17 Pro chipset from last year. Things run smoothly with high frame rates, perhaps a little bit more stability, I've noticed, and with the device overall just seeming like it's doing a great job of running. In other words, it's not obvious to me how much faster or more efficient this phone is, because it's already so darn fast and efficient to begin with, and that in and of itself is saying something. In the iPhone 16 Pro, you are also getting Bluetooth 5.3 support, with support for the SBC and AAC audio codecs, alongside of course your 5G and ultra wideband capabilities. I do have to quickly say, I think it's a little crazy how we are still limited to just SBC and AAC supported audio codecs on the Pro version of the iPhone this year. Even if the iPhone is one of the best devices at encoding AAC, I still wish we had at least support for one high-res Bluetooth audio codec, even at this point, if it was a proprietary Apple high-res Bluetooth audio codec. So many other phones so readily offer other high-res Bluetooth audio codecs. How are we still stuck on just SBC and AAC on the iPhone 16 Pro? Just saying. But how long can you actually expect this baby to last for? What's the battery life looking like in the iPhone 16 Pro models? The iPhone 16 Pro this year houses a slightly larger battery than last year at 3,582 milliampere hours. And the same goes for the iPhone 16 Pro Max with its slightly larger 4,685 milliampere hour battery. And how does that slightly larger battery translate to actual battery performance? It's better. Marginally, but it's better. I could easily make it through an entire day of use with the iPhone 16 Pro, and even actually have a little bit left over for the following morning if I needed to. All depending, of course, on what I'm using the iPhone 16 Pro for. If I'm doing a lot of photo or video editing and I got that brightness pumped up real high, of course my battery life is going to deteriorate, but with typical usage settings and just my daily workflow, I'm happy with the battery performance. It does seem to be a little bit longer than what I was experiencing in the iPhone 15 Pro. The iPhone is always a tank when it comes to battery life. And that's a testament to the overall efficiency, communication between the hardware and software on the device itself. Now in terms of recharging, when you're recharging wired, it seems to be a consistent like 20 to 30 watt wired charging input rating, and you still do have that 0 to 50% in just 30 minutes benchmark, which in my mind is the minimum acceptable benchmark for charging these days wired, and I'm happy with it. In terms of getting a full charge, my experience shows that you could get a full charge in anywhere from like an hour and a half to 2 hours. So not huge improvement there as it relates to wired recharging times, but we do see an improvement as it relates to MagSafe wireless recharging. You could actually MagSafe wireless recharge at 25 watts on the iPhone 16 Pro, up from the previous 15 watts on previous iPhone models. And in that case, you should probably be able to go from 0 to 50% battery using just MagSafe on the iPhone 16 Pro in just about an hour. So some general battery life upgrades here in the iPhone 16 Pro, especially with that MagSafe charging. But with all this having been said, here are my final thoughts on the iPhone 16 Pro and whether or not this year's new flagship iPhone is the best iPhone yet, and whether or not it's worth the upgrade. Long story short, yes, of course the iPhone 16 Pro is the best iPhone ever made to date. Having said that, however, on the question of whether or not it's worth actually upgrading to, that's a little bit more complicated. Honestly, I'm gonna go on the record here and say, unless you still have the iPhone 13 Pro or older, the iPhone 16 Pro is still not all that different from the iPhone 15 Pro or even the iPhone 14 Pro when you look at the bigger picture. The camera system has pretty much remained the same, besides the ultra-wide now getting a higher megapixel count, and of course, your ability to actually film up to 4K 120 frames per second now. Besides that, you do get improvements in performance and battery, but they're arguably marginal. And regarding the camera control button, unless you really need it or think you'll be able to use it, I don't know that it's as special as Apple's making it out to be. But let's not forget that at the end of the day, the iPhone 16 Pro in and of itself is still such an amazing smartphone. But unless you need all those new features we talked about, which arguably aren't a whole heck of a lot in number, the iPhone 16 Pro is definitely more of an incremental upgrade and a refinement than it is in and of itself a major upgrade. In fact, if we still had S's to describe iPhone models these days, I would definitely consider the iPhone 16 Pro an iPhone 15s Pro more so than an iPhone 16 Pro. Just saying. And as always, for the latest deals, prices, promos, and information for the iPhone 16 Pro, you can of course always head to my affiliate link, bmac.link/iPhone 16 Pro, or of course, as always, there's going to be clickable links in the video description box and in the comment section below, so check those out. But with that having been said, it is time for me to go shoot some B-roll for this video with the 4K 120 frames per second ProRes lag. I just gotta get my external storage. Where's that at? I will see you guys in my next video.